Hello there, my name is Jooles. I work for Natural Resources Wales. I'm the lead specialist advisor for coastal habitats and I cover sand dunes, shingle and soft cliffs. I'm currently working with the Dynamic Dunescapes project and I provide advice on the ecology and for the Welsh sites covered within the project. And I do have a slight interest in rabbits, which I'm going to talk to you about now. So most of us here either have an interest in sand dunes or rabbits or both, and you will know that when in good condition and exhibiting dynamic conditions, sand dunes are biodiversity hotspots, supporting large numbers of species which are adapted to living in harsh conditions found in the dune environment, such as shifting hot and parched substrates, poor soils, fluctuating water levels and salt-laden winds. And being biodiversity hotspots, sand dunes are particularly rich in habitats for invertebrates and typically support around 156 species of beetles, 117 species of flies, 65 species of bees and wasps, 50 species of bugs and 25 species of spiders. However, sand dunes are some of the most vulnerable habitats in the EU. And when we look at the conservation status by general habitat type, sand dune habitats have the lowest favourable conservation score of all the broad habitat types. So why do our sand dunes have the lowest favourable conservation score? We can get an insight into this if we drill down into the Article 17 data for the pressures and threats impacting on sand dune habitats. So let's look at one of the EU sand dune features, the fixed dune grassland. If we look at the pressures and threats ranked high for the feature in Wales, we can see that undergrazing has been identified as both a pressure and a threat, along with natural succession resulting in species composition change. One of the most important factors for maintaining high plant diversity on dunes is grazing, both by traditional domestic livestock, such as sheep and cattle, but also by the humble little rabbit. Rabbits are a keystone species on UK sand dunes and are possibly the most important herbivores for coastal sand dunes. Grazing by rabbits reduces dominant plant species and their burrowing up and scraping activities maintain a degree of dynamism in fixed dune communities and provide ideal conditions for the germination of seeds which would have no opportunities in denser vegetation which is not achieved by other grazers such as sheep and cattle. Despite being a non-native species, and we can debate as to whether they were introduced to the UK by the Romans or the Normans, rabbits have become an important part of our sand dune systems. And if we want to promote and conserve high species richness in our dune grasslands, maintenance of rabbit populations alongside traditional grazing will be necessary. So rabbits preferentially graze grasses and favour young succulent leaves and shoots and select more nutritious species such as the fescues. The graze sward tends to be short with a high abundance of dicotyledonous species. Rabbits create more and larger open soil patches than cattle and ponies. And their grazing maintains bryophyte and lichen-rich areas, which are so important for the diversity of habitats on our sand dunes. So we know that rabbits are good for maintaining a range of habitats on our sand dunes, but it is a fine balance where too much grazing by large populations of rabbits can cause damage and too little can lead to rank vegetation communities becoming dominant. Where are we now on this balance? So most likely we are tipped to the right on the low rabbit grazing pressure side. So you may be asking, what's the problem, right? There are loads of rabbits on sand dunes, but rabbit populations on sand dunes have declined significantly due to disease, myxomatosis and RHD, which is a rabbit hemorrhagic disease, and have been pushed out to localised patches due to reduction by heavy grazing stock. And coupled with other factors such as atmospheric nitrogen deposition, soil development, decreasing sediment supply, climate change and the loss of traditional uses of sand dunes, dunes have become more stable and rank and less suitable for rabbit grazing. All this has the knock-on effect of increasing vegetation growth, leading to rank dune grassland habitat, which becomes unfavourable for rabbit grazing. We know that rabbits, after their introduction to the UK, were highly prized for their meat and fur, and consequently hunted and raised in a controlled way, certainly on sand dunes where the sandy substrate was ideal for creating artificial rabbit warrens. And it is likely that the sand dunes' suitability for successful warrening resulted in the earlier successional stages of sand dune development being held for such prolonged periods. Rabbit growing was a lucrative business, and only those with manorial rights could own a warren, and these images depict well-dressed ladies catching their rabbits. However, despite rabbit rearing being a lucrative business, the rabbits were not that well suited to the British climate, having originated from the Iberian Peninsula in southern France. Also surprising was that the early rabbits were reluctant burrowers, which prompted some warreners to construct artificial burrows or pillar mounds. And over time, rabbits did get the message and became very, very adapted at burrowing. The rabbits were carefully reared and cosseted inside these specially enclosed protected warrens or conygarths. And within these warrens, pillar mounds were designed to provide well, dry, ventilated burrows in which the rabbit could breed comfortably. The very existence of these aids just emphasised both the animal's unease in the damp climate and the need to mother the animal carefully. Warrening was still popular during the 18th and 19th centuries, which can be seen from this painting by Anthony DEVIS, where there are two men using a wooden box trap to catch rabbits in the sand dunes near the once flourishing port of Newton in Merthyr Mawr in South Wales. It is interesting in this picture to see different coloured rabbits, which may either be different breeds or varieties which were often stocked in warrens. The black type being of good size of body with a rather hardy nature and good properties, and the white being delicate but a full-bodied kind which has a somewhat less hardiness of constitution than the black. Or it could be that the other colour morphs were as a result of lower natural predation on the rabbits, usually by the warreners' gamekeeping activities, which allows non-cryptic colour types to become more prominent in the population. Or it was just artistic licence, who knows. Rabbit populations on sand dunes remained high and the meat and fur quite popular until different varieties of domesticated rabbits were selectively bred and other habitat types exploited for rabbit warrening. It has been documented that the rabbits of the more common wild types, which were raised on light sandy substrates, were deemed less valuable in terms of their skins and their carcass, and this led to the dunes being a less profitable location to grow rabbits. During and after World War II, rabbit meat was an important part of the nation's diet. It was regarded as poor man's chicken and was consumed by low-income groups. Rabbit hunting was actively encouraged, particularly by the Ministry of Agriculture, who assisted farmers to cull rabbits to protect crops being grown during the war years. Up until 1952, rabbit trapping for food and fur was worth around £1.5 million annually. However, after the war and rationing ceased, rabbit meat fell out of fashion in the UK diet as folk moved to meats that had been less readily available during the rationing years. Consequently, with this lack of hunting, the wild rabbit population increased, including on the less well-tended warrens on the sand dunes. A lower demand for wild rabbits and changes in UK land use allowed their numbers to soar until in 1953 the deadly myxomatosis virus hit the UK. The virus spread slowly to start off with an advance of around 1.5 miles per month. However, by 1955 it had killed around 95% of the UK's rabbits. Clearly, the decimation of the rabbit had profound implications on the balance of nature across the UK landscape, the effects of which we are still seeing today. Some rabbit populations have a degree of natural immunity to the myxoma virus, and there do seem to be weaker strains of the virus. Where the disease is endemic, outbreaks tend to occur twice annually in most populations during spring and especially late summer or autumn. The mortality is usually between 5 and 33% when this occurs. Rabbit hemorrhagic disease, RHD, or sometimes known as VHD, viral hemorrhagic disease, or RCD, rabbit calcicovirus disease is not vector-borne like the myxoma virus, which is transferred by rabbit fleas, but distributed by the air, contact with other infected rabbits, and inanimate objects. Sadly, death usually occurs within 30 hours post-infection in susceptible rabbits. Disease tends to peak in late autumn and winter, but interestingly does not affect rabbits which are less than 6 to 8 weeks of age. There appears to be a degree of immunity in the UK, and mortality rates are around 30%, with no significant age or sex bias. All was not lost for the now hardy little rabbit, with its extraordinary reproductive strategy, having a gestation period of only 28 days, the ability to breed at 6 months and to produce 4 to 6 litters a year with between 3 and 9 kittens in each litter. The rabbit's rapid reproduction rate allowed it to bounce back. Rabbit populations on sand dunes still need a bit of help. They will fluctuate with seasonal disease outbreaks, but if bare sand is created and areas of grassland are mowed, the rabbits are extremely quick to move in, which, if complemented with traditional grazing, will give them greater resilience if disease events occur as they start to spread out. As part of the Dynamic Dunescapes project, we have been scraping areas of the sand dunes. They can be in wet areas for the dune slacks or dry areas in the fixed dune grassland. This slide shows an area in Morfa Bychan in North Wales where we have scraped an area of fixed dune grassland and brought in areas of bare sand which had previously been unavailable on the site. And within a couple of weeks, the rabbits already moved in, investigated the bare sand and started burrowing. It's just to show that if you create the bare sand, the rabbits will come. If the land is mowed, the grazing is right, that the rabbits will start flourishing once again in our sand dunes and produce the biodiversity that is so needed on our sand dune sites. Thanks for listening, and if you want any more information on the Dynamic Dunescapes project or sand dunes in general, just visit the Dynamic Dunescapes website.